Well, good morning everybody and welcome back to Wishwell Farms. Today is May 8th and we began picking greenhouse tomatoes on May 6th. I didn't film it on May 6th because it was a rainy, gloomy, miserable day and it was a very small pick. But today I want to take you around and show you exactly how we pick and pack our greenhouse tomatoes and our greenhouse grape tomatoes. So let's go get started. So up there, they clock in, they come down here to our packing area, grab a wheelbarrow, then they grab a stack of our yellow picking tubs. Put them in the wheelbarrow, and then we wheel that out to greenhouse number 1, our tall house, and that is where they are currently. Well, I should say she. I only got one lady here picking today because there's not a lot of kids out of school yet that won't be starting for probably another 3 weeks, and there's not a lot of tomatoes to pick, so having one person harvesting is all we need right now, at least on the red rounds. Now when we get down to our grape tomatoes here in a couple hours, it's all hands on deck. I'll probably even help pick those today because I only got 3 other workers here, 4 total. So we want to get done by lunchtime because it gets hot and everybody gets hungry, so we like to get those done before that. I don't like to have afternoon work on the farm. All right, we're in the greenhouse where we're going to be picking. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn off this fan jet so you can hear me. And we're going to turn on the cooling stage 1 for both side vents to cool it off in here a little bit. So you can look down through here and there's quite a bit of color. Looks decent today. We might get a tub out of every row, which is probably about half of what normal is. Eventually we'll be getting at least 2 tubs out of every row. As you can see on this side, we need to debranch bad. We're at least 3 branches behind, so 1 week of debranching. And I think it's because we skipped it the other day, but we lowered, so it brought down the plants really low, and there shouldn't be branches anywhere near the buckets. You should see red tomatoes and green tomatoes for like maybe 1.5 feet above the buckets. So this side's not near as bad. All right, let's get to picking some of these big beauties. Obviously we use a wheelbarrow. I want to take 2 of these tubs out and set them aside for when we need them later. And these lugs are nestable and stackable. So right now they're nested. I'm going to turn it around into the stackable position. And now we're going to fill this one to level. I'm not going to heap it, we're just going to fill it level. And then we're going to swap it out with the one underneath. Hard to do with one hand. The full one will go down underneath, and then the empty one on top. And now we can kind of heap this one up a little bit, and then we'll roll it back to the packing area to offload and come back and get more empty tubs. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time picking, but I do want to show you the process we go through to pick the greenhouse tomatoes. I got other things I need to do, but for being able to demonstrate on this video how we pick our greenhouse tomatoes, I'm going to stand here for a few minutes and I'll fill a partial tub. All right, so here's a cluster of tomatoes, 3 different shades. This shade right here we're going to leave. That one will be ready probably our next pick on Friday. Today's Wednesday, so in another 2 days, believe it or not, that will be at least as red as this one. Now ideally we'd only want to pick the nice red tomatoes. This one's almost too red. We'd prefer to pick them a little bit on the orange side for several reasons. The first reason is when they're red, there's more chance of damaging these tomatoes during the picking and packing process. They can get bruised by your fingers or your fingernails easier. They can get bruised in the bottom of the tubs when we're stacking 3 deep. They can get nicked by the sharp corners on this tub. And when that happens, we have to turn it into a secondhand tomato and sell it for basically half price. So we want to pick them slightly on the orange side because they will continue to ripen. Once they are showing color, they're called breakers. Most people pick breaker color, almost like this light colored one here. That'd be considered a breaker, almost beyond breaker. And once they get to that stage, they are fully mature and they will continue to ripen in the box and become as red as this one here and taste exactly the same. I think there's a misconception out there that if you don't let it ripen completely on the vine, you're missing out on some of the potential flavor or sugars that will be put into that tomato, but that is not the case with hydroponic tomatoes. We like them to be kind of that in-between color, so a little bit on the orange side, We'll get them picked and packed, and hopefully there's less chance of getting them damaged during that process. And then within a week, they'll be fully red and ready to take to market, just like this nice red tomato here. The second reason that we want to pick these tomatoes off the vine before they're too red is that the quicker that we can remove this color of tomato from the plant, the quicker it's going to begin ripening the next set of tomatoes that are still green or maybe turning. And the quicker we can do that, obviously the more tomatoes we're going to have to harvest. And there's actually a third reason. It'll alleviate this plant. This plant's under a lot of stress right now, and I'm afraid there's so much stress on this plant, we're probably going to have some blank clusters up here that aren't even going to form tomatoes until we harvest some tomatoes. So the quicker I can remove these ripe tomatoes, the quicker the stress will be relieved or alleviated from this plant, and it can continue to start growing like it's supposed to. If we see any green tomatoes, even if they're immature, that have fallen on the ground, we pick those up and put them in the tub, and then we'll sort them out later when we're packing. Sometimes you'll have a red one that falls on the ground. So if that happens during the week when we're not picking, I'll have the workers, just move it aside, maybe put it there on that little blue foam board, and then we'll pick it up when we're harvesting. So we're gonna grab this tomato, and I remove the calyxes. This is called a calyx, and we're gonna flip it into the wheelbarrow, and we'll discard all those into the yard or field once we have the wheelbarrow empty. So here is a red ripe tomato. It's probably 80% red, and that's what we want. Kind of that light to dark orange color. And we just roll them into the tub. Doesn't necessarily have to be stacked because they're only going to be in there for a few minutes until we get them back to the barn and move them into their boxes. And I'll show you that in a little bit, how we pack them into the boxes. All right, we got 3 tomatoes here I'm going to harvest. So here's the one that's the most red. If you pick them right, a lot of times the calyx will stay on the tomato truss, or maybe it'll partially stay on. So you can see on this one, half of it came off and half of it stayed on. So those are the ones that are really easy to remove. And obviously it's hard to do it with one hand. You know what? Let's put the camera on the old tripod. There we go. So just pop the rest of that off. So if you pick them properly, like against the way that they're sticking off the tomato truss, a lot of times this calyx will come off on its own. But I have noticed that early in the season, they tend to want to stay on the tomatoes. Later on, when we get into June and July, 90% of the time, they're going to stay on the tomato truss. But until then, we have to carefully remove it. The main reason we do this is because I don't want them poking each other when we're stacking them. It just slows down the picking harvest process so much when we have to watch the calyxes. And I know that leaving the calyx on the tomato is kind of a trademark of hydroponic tomatoes, but I don't really care about that. Hydroponic tomatoes for me is just a way to have early tomatoes to take to farmers markets for a couple months until we get into our field tomatoes. This one's a hair on the light side, but I'm gonna go ahead and take it. That's actually the color we want to pick them. A light shade of orange. It's tougher and more firm and not gonna get damaged in the picking and packing process. Remove that calyx, and yeah, sometimes they're difficult, and if you're not careful and you have long fingernails, you can puncture the skin, and you definitely do not want that. And I'll just gather up these tomatoes and we'll roll them in here. Some of the girls like to stack them upside down. I almost prefer to stack them upside right, because when you get a couple layers in here with weight on the hair, and you stack them upside down, the shoulder of the tomato, which is kind of this upper area, can get slightly blemished and maybe take on an imprint of the plastic tote. We don't want that, because when customers are shopping at the farmers markets, if they see an ugly blemished area on top of this tomato, even though 99.9% of the tomato is perfect, they won't buy it. So we definitely need to protect the top of the tomato. Give you a little look here of what we're harvesting. Definitely some good color right here. They're really kicking in now. Now if you look at this tomato, you can see that it has been, the whole cluster, this truss has all been harvested except this final tomato. Let's see. Oh, I thought I could get it off without the calyx coming off, but no luck. So they are coming off pretty easy this year, fortunately. I have really struggled in the past removing some of them early in the season, but for some reason they're coming off easy this year. Now you see here we have an empty tomato cluster, or an empty truss, and there's still a J-hook here. We do not remove the J-hooks. If I had a dozen extra kids wanting work right now, maybe I would consider it, but they're so cheap and it's such a labor-intensive job to go through and remove all those, including the clips, that we just leave them on there. They'll get drug out at the end of the season after we terminate the plants and burnt in the burn pile. So yeah, it's probably not the best thing to do, the best way to do it, but that's what we do. I've mentioned this numerous times in other videos, but if you're new to my channel, I'll go ahead and tell you what our tomato varieties are. These first 3 rows are Geronimo, 1 row of Terero, and our 5th row is, I put my head on this darn cable. I put a pipe insulation pad on there so people don't cut themselves on this cable. It's kind of a support cable for helping to hold the weight of these plants. This post could lean in if I didn't have it supported with a cable anchored outside the greenhouse. Okay, this 5th and final row is Ondero. This is a new one for me. It's fairly new. I'm sure it's been out for several years, but it was the first year that I became aware of it, and I wanted to try something other than Varieties. Varieties has always been my 5th row that goes here, and I've never been real happy with the plant habitat. I don't know a better way to describe that term. The plant habit, maybe that's a better term. It was just very strange in the way the branches and the suckers, the leaves and the suckers looked on it, and it was hard to de-leaf them. I call it de-branching. They're really called leaves, but I call them branches. You would think that'd be the right term. Branches have leaves on them, but actually this is considered a leaf. This whole thing, this whole branch is considered a leaf, but we call them branches just so we don't confuse our employees. Anyway, I'm really happy with Ondero. Definitely going to, at this point, I'm definitely going to try it next year. They're a little later than Geronimo and Terero. I don't hardly see any red tomatoes on the Ondero, but the size is really good, and the plant habit is very open. The leaves and branches and suckers all snap off really good. It doesn't have a weird style of growth like Varieties did. Varieties just did not look like Terero or Geronimo or Big Dena. Speaking of Geronimo, for probably 5 years, if not 6, the seed was unavailable. DeRuyter Seeds, which is where these seeds all come from, over in Europe, maybe Holland, I forget. It wasn't available. I don't know if they quit growing it and restarted, I'm not sure. But Big Dena filled that variety for me, and we really, really liked Big Dena. And I missed Geronimo, so I thought. So Geronimo became available this year again, and Big Dena had a crop failure. So fortunately it worked out that I was able to get Geronimo, but unfortunately wasn't able to get Big Dena. So I'm not as happy with Geronimo as I thought I'd be. We've had some blossom end rot and just some weird things happening over here, but I think it's some kind of stress related issue, because in the long greenhouse number 2, they look fantastic. So next year, hopefully Big Dena will be available again. I won't stop growing Geronimo, but maybe I'll grow less of it and I'll incorporate some more Big Dena back in there. And I always think I'm going to quit growing Terero, but it looks really good this year, so I'll probably continue doing 1 row of Terero. And if Ondero turns out really, really good this year, we might even up our amount of Ondero that we grow. All right, I just found this tomato on the ground. It's got 3 issues that I'm not happy with. First of all, let me remove this calyx. Again, this is difficult with one hand. There we go. You see the little minute cracks around the top? This GoPro is terrible at focusing, so I can't really put it up real close. So I got all these little circular cracks up here. It's called russeting, and usually that is a environmental issue with humidity and temperature and condensation. It could also be a watering issue. You know, maybe I fed them too much on a cloudy day. And you know, when that happens, the plant's not photosynthesizing, so it's going to push all that extra water right into the fruit, and then you'll get actual cracking. Much more than this little rusting around the top. You'll actually have cracked fruit all the way down the side. So the way I combat that is holding off the start of my irrigation cycle till 9 a.m. Even though the sun's up and it starts getting hot in here, I want these plants fully taking up the sunshine and photosynthesizing before I start feeding them. Then I know it's going to go into the plant itself and not push all that extra water that it doesn't need early in the morning into the fruit, which would cause more cracking. So that is one way we fight that. Now, a few other issues on this tomato. I see a little zipper scar. Almost bad enough that I can't even consider this number one. I will, because it's not really harming the tomato, but that is also caused from being too humid in the greenhouse. So when it was being formed, there was, I don't know how to explain it, the blossom kind of stuck to the tomato as the tomato started growing and forms that zipper scar. And it's also got a small cat face. When you got these big blossom in scars on the bottom, sometimes they're huge, and the tomato actually gets oval shaped, almost like a boat. Those are called cat face tomatoes. Another humidity and condensation issue that can be corrected through proper environmental controls. I don't normally have too many issues like that in this greenhouse because it's fully automated, but it still does happen from time to time. All right, we currently have about half the greenhouse picked. I'm gonna leave Emma alone to finish picking, and I'm gonna go get started in the other greenhouse doing some plant maintenance. We have some lowering, sucker pruning, clipping, J-hooking, all that good stuff in the other greenhouse, and they need my help to finish that up. So we just about have this harvested. You can see this is what a row looks like after it's been harvested. There's still some color down here, but you can see it's a lot lighter color that's going to be fine to harvest on Friday, 2 days from now. Now, when we really start ramping things up in here and we're having trouble keeping up, we will pick this color. This is probably the color we like to pick them at. But since we're just getting started, it's okay just to get the nice dark red ones out right now. As soon as we get finished harvesting, and get this other greenhouse work done, I'll take you into the packing area and show you how we offload the tomatoes onto our packing table, the boxes that we use, and how we actually pack them into our boxes and stack them on the pallet. I'm going to show you the whole process, so stay tuned. So the bottom one is not as full because we want to be able to stack that top one on top of it. And then, you know, we can fill the top one a little bit fuller, but if you end up at the end of a row and it looks like that, that's perfect. Then we just bring them in here into the packing area. I didn't turn the lights on, so it's a little dark in here. I apologize. And we just offload them onto a table, a couple tables. Eventually we'll have the round washer table full, and we'll have 2 more tables over here full. And on a good day, we'll have 25, 30 tubs of tomatoes from our greenhouses that need to be packed. I'm hoping some of these things I'm explaining to you are interesting and helpful. I mean, a lot of it is just second nature to me. I've been doing this for a long time. 2001 was the first year I started growing greenhouse tomatoes, and you know, you pick up a lot of things over the years and learn a lot from trial and error and from other growers that you may talk to. So yeah, like I said, it's all second nature to me, but I want to share my knowledge and information with you guys that are interested in this and trying to learn more about maybe growing your own greenhouse tomatoes or garden tomatoes. There's always some issues. Some years are better than others. Some years I don't have any problems at all for a long time, but it seems like there's always a couple of weeks there where the plants are stressed out and it takes a couple of harvests for things to really get clicking again. I could be doing more. I could be doing sap analysis on the petioles of the leaves. I could be harvesting handfuls of leaf tips, leaflets, I forget what they're called, leaf tips off the leaves and branches around the greenhouse and sending those in to get an analysis done to see if there's anything out of whack in what I'm feeding them, and I can adjust my recipe accordingly. I used to do that every other week, maybe once a month, and I stopped doing it probably a decade ago. I probably should get back into doing that again, and I would probably see a lot less issues with our tomato plants. We are just about ready to pack these tomatoes. I only have 6 tubs today, so still a very small pick. We normally have a couple hundred tomato boxes stacked right here on this table. Those are grape tomato flats, or 12-pint flats. We use this for the grape tomatoes, and then the 10-pound single layer flats. They're usually stacked right here, but I palletized them all last year and rolled them in here into the cooler for storage. I see I only have 1 pallet here, and I think I have 3 more palletfuls down the road at our other farm. So I need to bring a stack of these out. It's probably 110, something like that there. So we'll take a couple stacks out there and we'll get packing. You know what? I'm just gonna get my pallet jack and wheel the whole thing out there because we're gonna need all those boxes by next week anyway. Normally packing tomatoes takes about a half hour to an hour, just depending on how big the pick is. Today's very small. I have 3 people here working in the greenhouses. They'll be done here in a few minutes and help me pack these. It'll take probably 10 minutes. A good pick for us would be about a little over 100 10-pound cases. So I'm sure today we're only gonna get about 15 to 20. So we're way off from being in full production of hydroponic tomato harvest. But at least we got a good start, and I'll show you the process of how we do this. We always leave a yellow tub on the ground for our second-hand tomatoes. These are scratch or dents, odd shapes, or little baby green ones that aren't big enough to sell as a full-size fried green tomato. Like that. Once they get that big, we'll make a separate box of just the greens that have fallen off the plant. So we pack our tomatoes into 2 sizes. Medium and large, and medium and small. So all these little guys will go in a separate box, maybe up to that big. Smalls and mediums. Once it gets bigger than that, I would consider it a large. We'll put the larges in a separate box. The reason I'm not concerned about having them sized perfectly is that when we get to the farmers markets, we'll unload the larges, the stacks of larges, right onto the tables, loose. We'll stack them just like this, but we'll stack them too high at the farmers market displays, about like that. The little ones are going to be quarted up into quart containers and sold by the quart. So that's why we separate them into 2 different sizes. So not too much to it. And I see that everybody's here ready to pack tomatoes. We reuse all of our boxes, if you were wondering. Many of these boxes have probably been packed with tomatoes a half dozen times, if not more. If a tomato happens to rot inside one of the boxes, or it gets wet from a rainstorm or something like that, those will be discarded. But as long as they're a solid box and clean, we'll keep reusing it over and over until it's no good. Just about have it wrapped up here. Just a few more boxes to pack. This is how we stack them on a pallet. 3 across, 2 rows of 3 across, and then 2 rows the other direction. And we usually try to stop at 12 high, which is 96 boxes. We will go 13 or 14 high if we're short on space. And eventually, when we're picking out of every greenhouse, we may have a pallet and a half each time we pick, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And when we start picking field tomatoes, there could be 3 or 4 pallets, but that's just a couple times during late August when they're really coming on strong. So yeah, about every other day, once we get picking in all the greenhouses, we hope to get a full skid, and then that allows us to have about 3, usually 4 skids to choose from for packing up our 5 box trucks that are lined up out here and one of our mobile produce trailers. All right, all finished and packing tomatoes for today. We're ending up with 20 boxes, so not a lot, but it's a decent start. We now have 35 boxes here for our first farmers market on May 18th, so almost 2 weeks away still. So we have plenty of time to stockpile probably another 40, 50 boxes, so we have plenty to go around to all of our farmers markets. And then on May 25th, that'll be our first big weekend. And hopefully we'll have about 150 to 200 boxes to spread around to our 5 locations. Actually, I think we'll only be going to 4 farmers markets and our 1 roadside stand with our mobile market trailer. So yeah, we'll still be at hopefully 6 locations. But if we don't have enough tomatoes, we'll just go to the best markets. The ones that do less, I'll save for maybe another week or 2 down the road until things really kick in and we have more tomatoes to sell. Unfortunately, we ran out of time to pick and pack the grape tomatoes. It's after noon and everybody was hungry. I'm hungry myself, so I sent everybody home and I'm heading in for lunch. I will be back tomorrow morning for picking and packing the grape tomatoes. See you then.